Thank you for joining me. We've been talking for an hour.
Yeah, but we haven't said anything. Have we? Why anything of importance or no? We've just gossiped and
yeah. Yep.
you'll edit it down. It'll be like 3 minutes of like anything of.
It'll be 20 minutes of how amazing Canberra is, and then Cath makes a quilt. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Fussy Cutters Club podcast, a show that gives you permission to cut into the good fabric so you can make quilts you love. And now your host, who believes it's not a crime to love using novelty fabrics, Ange Wilson.
Welcome to Fussy Cutters Club podcast. Today I'm joined with a fellow Aussie, but this Aussie lives in America, is married to an American, has lived in the UK, has led an amazing life behind the sewing machine. It's Cath from Wombat Quilts. Cath is one of my favourite scrappy quilters. Cath has an eye for scrappy quilts that is just sublime and brings me nothing but joy when I see them. I've had the pleasure of meeting Cath once, but we've been in contact via the wonderful web for many years. Cath has what we in Australia would say a heart bigger than Phar Lap. And if you are any sort of Google person, you go check it out and you'll understand the reference. Cath is generous beyond fault, just an amazing human being, lovely to boot, and I don't know what else to say other than I just adore her. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you enjoy listening to us chat about everything and anything. Let's get chatting. Welcome, Cath. Typical, laughing already.
Oh dear, sorry, yeah. Yeah, yep. There's even tears with that one. Okay.
So for those that are unfamiliar with Cath and her amazing work, Cath is an Aussie living in America. How long have you been in America for, Cath?
18 years.
Ooh.
Jeez, that's a lot.
It is. We worked,
but I'm still at the ratio where I'm still Australian because I've lived in Australia more than I've lived in England and the US. Now, if you combine England and the US, it gets a little dicey, but Australia is still the majority of my time. So I'm still Australian.
Yep.
For the moment.
Yeah, we were having that conversation when we moved. So we moved back to my hometown and people are like, oh, where are you from? And I'd go, oh, I'm from here. And then I'd do the math and I go, I spent longer in Canberra than I did here. Do I count as a Canberran? I don't know here.
No, don't, no.
Oh, I love Canberra. I am one of those freaky people that just loves Canberra.
My dad spent his whole career and didn't get the final promotion to official colonel in the Australian Army because he refused to do a stint in Canberra.
He missed out.
Refused? Oh, no, it was like, no. So, I come by my biases, not honestly. In our family, Canberra's like, no.
Yeah, no. And our kid was born in Canberra, so he is an official Canberran.
Ooh.
I know, and we were living in Queanbeyan at the time. So for those unfamiliar, Canberra has like a satellite city that they both touch along the border of the city. So you don't know you're going from Queanbeyan, which is in New South Wales, into Canberra, which is the ACT. It's just all one big blob of suburbanness. And so we were living in Queanbeyan, and I was adamant that he was going to be born in Canberra and he would not be born at the Queanbeyan hospital. Nothing against Queanbeyan. I just really love Canberra. So yes.
That's a really love Canberra.
Yeah. Went to Canberra in grade 12 for a school field trip. And as we drove into Canberra, I turned to the kid sitting beside me and went, I'm going to live here one day. I'd never been before.
Wow.
And I'm like, dreams really do come true.
No. Okay, so offline at some point, you're going to have to have a conversation with my husband because he's only heard completely negative things about Canberra, except for we've got one friend, I've got a friend, Joelle, who when she was 14 did a soccer camp in Canberra. So 14-year-old Joelle, who's now, I think she's just turned 50, but 14-year-old Joelle thought Canberra was brilliant. But when asked why it was brilliant, 50-year-old Joelle could not
articulate it.
Say anything other than I was 14 and I was in Australia. So, yeah, because Nick is convinced that we're just purely biased against Canberra and it's actually probably a place worth visiting. But it's never hit our itineraries when we've come home.
Oh, yeah. It's stunning. Like, it's just stunning. It's well maintained because it's the capital of Australia. It's got the National Museum, the National Art Gallery, the War Memorial, the Old Parliament House, New Parliament House, all the embassies. In spring, it is gorgeous because it's got that cooler weather climate, so you get all the bulb flowers. In fall, it's amazing because all the trees lose their leaves and change colours. The cherry blossoms are spectacular. The food scene in Canberra is amazing, like really good food. The art scene in Canberra is really strong as well. Like, I really loved living there. We were married at the National Art Gallery, so, you know, quite a spectacular place to live. But, yeah, the roads are really good. Being back in Queensland, that's the one thing I noticed. The roads are really good. The quality of education's good. The healthcare system compared to Queensland is amazing. But, yeah, I mean, the median income in Canberra is quite significantly higher than the rest of Australia. So, you know, you're living in a Gucci part of the country.
It sounds a lot like DC, you know, like somewhat manufactured as a city because it's a solution to finding a capital and because it's got all the government. It's just, and I think that's what some people sort of don't like about it is the fact that it's it doesn't feel natural. It feels manufactured.
Yeah, and I think over the years they've worked really hard to make it more of a community. I think when the fires went through, made a really big difference because everyone had to pull together for the community, and so it kind of changed the vibe a bit. But anyway, we digress. Canberra is amazing.
Oh, we do.
Tourism,
we do.
Canberra.
And I believe my brother is on a war memorial there, so I need to, like, as in his picture is carved in granite.
Oh.
Yeah, so I may have to go.
Yeah.
Plus, Nick really wants to go. So anyway, we digress. Yep. We digress.
Well, it was good because that's where I started quilting because quilts in the tropics, obviously not as important, but quilts where it gets below zero, 2 thumbs up. So we met at Quilt Market Sam and I were talking about this the other day. I think it's 2017.
Yeah.
And we met through Christy from Make Modern. And I have been in love with you ever since, Cath. Because you were one of the first people I met who, and I know this will sound funny, but didn't make fussy cutting out to be some naff little side thing, that dirty little secret that quilters kept in the closet kind of thing. Because up until that point, if you said to someone, oh, I'm a fussy cutter, the first thing out of their mouths was, oh, it's a waste of fabric. And you were like, no.
No.
Right?
Really? Wow. So I had never come across that.
Yeah.
And if I had, I may have just selectively thought, well, you're wrong and moved on because I kind of have that sort of, you're wrong, move on. Because for me, fussy cutting has always been, and I think it's because of how I started. Because I started making charity quilts for kids. So it was always the fabrics which had the fun prints on it, I was always gravitating towards. My precision cutting was not always good. And also sometimes just because, you know, it was the last bit of fabric, I wasn't always precise with, you'd have someone with their head cut off in one corner. But I kind of figured the kid's not going to care about that. But I realized, thinking about it the other day, so when I started, it was 1998. It was in Queensland. We had a couple of local quilt stores, but I was unemployed after a car accident on a film set. And so money was tight, and I was raiding scrap bins and buying, little slithers of fabric. So really sort of very scrappy to begin with. But because I was quilting for kids, finding really good novelty prints was not easy. There was a lot of that brown, rusty sort of, there's a term for it, but that American
reproduction.
Well, yeah, but it was more, it wasn't twee. It was like colonial, like straw and corn and corn dolls and things like that. And that never really floated my boat. And I found a designer called Cara Pearson. She did KP Kids, and it was for South Sea Island Fabrics. This was
years ago.
Years ago. I've still got some of the prints in my stash, which is amazing. But I bought tons of her stuff because she had like kids playing sport and balls and hearts and Halloween stuff and da-da-da. And she was the first designer where I could actually really fussy cut, like where you could find just really great stuff. And she also did panels where there was enough room around the image that you could cut nicely and things like that. And I just, up until probably 2004, probably about 50% of my stash was her stuff. I just hoarded it over the years. But when I moved to the US from England, I bought a lot of K Facet, and I put a lot of that into kids' quilts. But when I moved to the US, that was when I discovered Heather Ross, Lizzie House, all these amazing designers that did, so much fun. But I think, even now the designers are putting more stuff that we can fussy cut in. It's just.
Yeah.
It's more acceptable.
Well, early on I was drawn to, I always think of them as the illustrators. So Heather Ross is an illustrator. Lizzie House is an illustrator. Yeah. I would argue that Chula Pink is definitely an illustrator.
Yes.
Those people who have that illustrative background tend to make stuff that is more fussy cut friendly because they're putting in vinaigrettes. No, that's a salad dressing. Vignettes.
I knew exactly what you were talking about, but yes.
Vignettes. But they're putting in little scenes into their or they're character driven. Was one of the things I love about Lizzie House was that she did characters. Yes. Same with Heather Ross.
Yeah, you've heard the news about Lizzie.
She's going back to doing fabric.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. I feel really guilty because I do keep a finger on the pulse with Lizzie. Like I do stalk from a distance, but I don't want to put pressure on her to do fabric because I want her to be creatively happy. And so I try not to get excited.
Well, from what I read from an email last week, she's putting together like a best of for sort of like spoon flour and things like that. I love that.
Me too.
The whole, I would quite happily have Outfoxed and Constellation and
Whisper.
1001 People, all her lines. Yeah.
Whisper.
Yeah.
I really miss not having gotten a lot of Whisper, which was her low volume. And I bought yards of it and I have just gone through it like you would not believe. So.
Yeah, I was home a while ago and I found at Spotlight bolts of Constellation.
Yeah, because the distributor here sold them off to Spotties when they couldn't move them. So for Tracy at home, Spotlight is Joanne's.
Yes.
So, but yeah, Constellation. I really love, I think it was 1001 Peeps, but the line of people, and it's got one of my favourite motifs in it. And not very politically correct, but it's a little guy playing a lyre lyre thing, lute, whatever. And there's a rooster beside his feet. And in my head, every time I see it, I hear rock out with your cock out. And that's... And because I'm an idiot, I went to Quilt Market and I went to Lizzie House. This is my favourite print. This is what I hear. And I think she was mortified because someone would speak like that. And I was like, yeah, sorry, I'm Australian.
Well, look, you're making me feel better because I think it was the same Quilt Market that I met her for the first time. And I spent my career in film. So I've met A-list actors and worked with. I have never, ever been speechless and fangirled like I did in front of Lizzie House. I don't think the words were making sense that were coming out of my mouth.
I did that with Heather Ross, and I think to the point where Heather Ross was like, could you just move on now?
Heather, I knew Heather through her agent because in my film work I used a lot of illustrators. So her agent and I were good friends. So I actually knew her aside from the quilting. But yeah, Lizzie House is. And then during COVID, I was playing Animal Crossing with Lizzie House, and my proudest moment to date is that I gave her a pink bathtub in Animal Crossing.
See, this blows my mind. One, I am so down that Lizzie House would play Animal Crossing because it fits in with her, like she does cute stuff. Two, in my head, I'm like, ooh, imagine if Lizzie House did her own Animal Crossing where she drew everything for...
That would be cool.
And then
that would be cool.
Pink bathtub, so you to give it away to somebody who needed it. You're ticking all the boxes.
The joy of Animal Crossing is that once you've got it, you can buy it again. Yeah. But she hadn't got her hands on it yet. So in giving it to her, I could still get another one, but she got it in her inventory. Her island was beautifully colour coordinated.
Yeah.
We had a day there where there was a group of us wandering around her island picking flowers and fishing, and it was like, I'm hanging out with Lizzie House in Animal Crossing. It was... Look, COVID did some weird things to all of us, but it was yeah.
So, getting back to the fussy cutting, but this is how a fussy cutter's mind works, right? Because I think, and I don't know whether you would agree, but I think on some level we see the world a little bit differently. I mean, everybody sees the world differently, but we're attracted to similar things. And one of them is storytelling through our quilts, and then looking for, a lot of people look at what colours are in the prints, whereas for us we kind of look at it and go, all right, what are my opportunities for showing off this print to its best advantage? How am I going to cut this print? I always look for how much negative space is around the things that I like, because I want to get a clean cut around it. And so I always get really excited when designers put out a range that includes some sort of print that's just floating in negative space.
Yeah, like my favorites are the Ruby Star has been doing those panels where they're just like they're fussy cut heaven. I also picked up a lot of the mask.
Oh, yeah.
The face mask ones for you're like $2 a panel. And the fussy cutting in those is so much fun.
Yeah.
But yes, sorry, we digress again.
No.
I must admit, even when I'm looking at fussy cuts, I look in colour.
Yeah.
It's because so much of what I do is in colour. And I think it's why Tula Pink, I've got a bit of it, but I've actually got a lot of it, and there's probably some Tula trips that would kill for some of the stuff I've got in there, but I look at it, I'm like, I don't know how to use it. So one of the things that links us is Sam Hunter, and I've been doing a lot of her Fast 14.
Yep.
She had one which was just perfect for fussy cutting, and I've made 16 of them. Yeah, the last one I made was a Tula Pink one, and I've just finished it, and it's insanity. it's insane. I look at it and go, this is absolutely crazy. It's so much. So I made 3 Lizzie House ones, and then I've made probably about 8 Ruby Star stroke cotton and steel ones. And I thought I have to try using Tula's fabric. And I tried.
See,
but it's so busy. It's like
I'm making one now, and I am like, I haven't made, you know what it's like when you turn your business into, sorry, I would have my sound. I just,
the hobby into a business.
yeah. And so a lot of times when I'm sewing, it's sewing for work, not for fun. Yeah. And so it's been a while since I sewed something where I kind of went, oh, I'm just having fun. And I'm making a version of Kinship at the moment for 100 Days, which is just Chula Pink, but a very limited colour pattern palette for Chula Pink. And it is bananas. I've just sent you a photo of it.
That's what that Bing was. Sorry, I don't know how to turn the Bing notifications.
That's right. We didn't hear it.
Oh, good.
But it's all fussy cut, and it is just, I love it. It's a glorious cacophony of pattern. But
yeah,
I know I'm a what do you call that? Minority when it comes to.
You use things other than her prints in there. You use other fabrics which are just colours.
Yeah, or
in that, or
no, not well. I've used her tone on tone black and her tone on tone white, which was
okay.
And then I do tend to try and use some of her prints are tone on tone, so they read as a colour from a distance.
Yeah.
And I do, I don't know. I try to normally, if I was making a Chula Pink quilt that wasn't for me, I try and splice in some solids to give your eye a place to rest. But on this one, I'm just going cocoa bananas and like putting everything together that I love. But it is a quilt. When it's done, you won't want to have a hangover when you wake up under it.
I just sent you the Fast 14 I've just finished, which is exactly the same.
Do you need my mailing address? Because you could send it to me.
Well, it's a charity quilt, so it has actually already gone to the hospital.
Which is beautiful.
So some kid, it's a lot of the kitten line.
Oh, Tabby Road, which she's just re-released as Deja Vu.
Yeah, but also some other cats and other bits. And so I did limit my palette with it, but it's still insane. It's got some K facet dots. But, yeah, it's crazy. You should eventually get that through the message. But it was like, oh, this is why I struggle with her, because it does my head in. It's just an explosion of colour and pattern. And it's like, whereas with all of them that I did, with the Lizzie House one, I did one in like greens and browns, and I do everything limited colour palettes. Yeah. But
that's your superpower, right? Because you can take like different fabrics, scraps, techniques, because like you said, you do a lot of the charity work. You're the charity, what's the word? You're not the charity, but you're the charity organizer for the Portland Modern Quilt Guild. Is that?
I am, yeah.
And so you take a lot of the donated blocks that guys make, or that you go, we need these blocks, make this. This is the colour palette we're using. So you have a skill for really articulating a tight colour palette where things will work based on that colour palette.
Yes, I'm a control freak.
No, on this podcast. No, we like the term control enthusiast.
Oh, I like that. Yes, I am a control enthusiast.
Yep.
So when we do charity sew days, which we do once a month, where people come in and sew, I set the block, but I also supply all the fabric. And I supply all the fabric because I pre-curate it so you don't get any nasty surprises.
Yeah, which is good. Like, it's smart. So we did touch on it. You have been powering through and making multiple versions of Sam Hunter's 14 Squared.
Yes.
And you and Sam have just worked together to produce a Fussy Cutters addendum for 14 Squared. I like to think of the Fussy Cutters addendum for that pattern as a bridge from a non-fussy cutter to walk over and fall in love with the world of fussy cutting, because you guys cover everything, how to work with directional prints, the right scale for the prints that work in the right, like in the various patches. Is there, I guess, are you trying to convert people to fussy cutting? Are you evangelizing for fussy cutting?
That's an interesting one. I like to think that, if I can corrupt people into joining the dark side of fussy cutting, then that's a good thing. But I know because I work with a lot of people, not everyone, some people just, it's not their jam.
Yeah, which is fine.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I do, even during the charity shows, I'll slip in some stuff that are fussy cut, particularly if we're doing improv blocks. There'll be little pieces like neatly fussy cut, and people will just slip them into the blocks. And I'm like, yes, you just made a fussy cut block and you don't even know it. So, yes, I'm evil. Honestly, I can't understand why you wouldn't do it. I can't understand why it wouldn't be something that you wouldn't embrace.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the arguments against it, like the Swiss cheese argument, which my response to that is you're just not looking at all the fabric. If you think that, because every fussy cutter that I know that is proficient in fussy cutting, it's like their thing that excites them, they can eke out every last thread of that fabric and use it in everything.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
And so I think there's a skill in that, and it's my job to go out and educate people on how to use the Swiss cheese and how to look at Swiss cheese and go, yep, I can make a pizza with that. The other thing I think is people are like, well, I don't understand how to cut it and how to center it. And so I do it eyeball, like I can eyeball most things now, but I know that there are tools out there that when I was starting, like Marty Michelle's fussy cut ruler.
Those are what I still use. Those are in my toolkit, definitely. And I use those when I want. There are sometimes when you're making a block, and when I'm taking the time to slowly make a block, then those rulers come out and everything is beautiful and centered. And if I am improving and just flowing with it, then I'll eyeball it. If I'm doing something where the same print is showing up repeatedly, I'll then use the rulers as well. I've around my desk, I've got the Marty Michelle ones, which are really great because they show you the center of the piece as well. And they've got the seam allowance marked in, because that for a long time, the seam, like visualizing the seam allowance when I was cutting was throwing me a little. So what I found was using those rulers helped get me more precise in my eyeballing.
Yep.
So it was like they were like training wheels. But yeah, I've used masking tape. So if I've got a weird size that isn't part of the set, I'll use big, thick painter's tape or masking tape and mask off my ruler so that I can sort of visually see where I'm going.
Yeah, I use a lot of washi tape. I washi tape all of her templates so that the seam allowance is on them, and I've got a tutorial on how to do that. But we released our own washi tape so that, it's pretty. And Lizzie House has washi tape. Well, she does. A limited run of washi tape left, I think.
I may possibly have every single one she's done, but yes.
Right, okay. So Cath is selling some black market Lizzie House.
No, Cath is hoarding. Like she's hoarding Lizzie House fabric. Yeah. She is hoarding her Lizzie House washi tape.
So there are...
If I like you get a piece of it on a leather or a basket.
There is tips and tricks and things like that. And I spoke with Handmade by Katie, and she does really intricate EPP. and she's gotten to the point where she can eyeball a repeat, which I know. And I think that's a real
life goal.
Yeah.
Life goal,
I can
definitely.
sort of, but I do that thing where I look for points of reference when I put the template down. But yeah, I mean, it's those things that I think, and I guess the fear of fussy cutting for me, I always think stems from the same things that any fear in life stem from, or prejudice, is it's a misunderstanding and a lack of education. And so I think as fussy cutters, it's my job to get out there and go, right, this is how you do it. It's how you do it. But it brings me to my next question. You have quite the extensive cotton and steel, old school cotton and steel collection.
Oh, but also the new Ruby Star.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you were on a desert island and you could only take one collection with you, is there a collection that you cannot live without?
So this is interesting because my stash is my very full sewing room is I've got 4 drawers of Lizzie House. I've got 5 drawers of Heather Ross, and I've got 12 drawers of Cotton and Steel Stroke Ruby Star. So if I choose Cotton and Steel Stroke Ruby Star, I get more fabric. But if I'm honest, I have a drawer of Tula and other bits and pieces. Jill Howarth is my.
Riley Blake.
Zippy Bro.
Yeah.
Riley Blake.
Again,
she's fun too.
Another illustrator.
Absolutely. So much. Yeah.
Yep.
I get more use out of my Ruby Star cotton and steel. I use it much more than anything else. But I think my Lizzie House stash would come with me.
Gives you all the feels.
It gives me all the feels. And part of the reason after the stroke, I started using it more because there was this moment of, like, if I died, Sam would have had to come in and sort of sort out my stash. And why the heck am I hoarding fabric and not using it? So I've started using it more, but it's still precious. Whereas Ruby Star, Cotton and Steel, they're constantly coming out with new fabulous stuff. I got to the stage where I just order a fat quarter bundle of everything.
Yeah.
So I have a dealer. She ships me a fat quarter every time something's released, and it goes into the stash. It's a problem. It's a problem.
I'll send you a photo of my.
I feel more comfortable using that stuff because there's more of it coming in.
Yeah.
Whereas Lizzie, there's not more coming in. Heather Ross, I really love, and I do use bits of it, but I need to consciously use more. I love it so much, but I don't use it as much as I use the Cotton and Steel. The Cotton and Steel girls give me everything I need. Sorry, the Ruby Star girls give me everything I need. Yep. They give me my blenders. They give me my amazing fussy cuts. They give me different styles, different things. The last 14 square that I've got now that I'm attaching binding to is Rashida's Linear line. And that was the first time I'd ever used just a line of fabric to make a 14 squared, because I usually just pull lots of stuff. I like my options. And it was an interesting exercise to just keep it to
I can't.
20 odd prints.
I can't.
I like to challenge myself. See, there was a time a little while ago where I made a decision, I was sort of blogging a lot. I was getting a lot of interest, and I decided, unlike you and Sam, I didn't want to turn my hobby into how I was, making money, because it was the only thing keeping me sane. And I didn't want to lose that. I'm in awe of both you and Sam and anyone who makes a living doing this, because it's not easy. But I wanted to protect it. But that allows me a freedom. So if I'm making something, it's like, oh, let's try the challenge of just using the fabric from that line. What can I – because I don't usually quilt like that. I know there's a lot of quilters that do. They'll buy a bundle and that's how they work. and that gives them security to sort of, safely play with colors and patterns and things like that. But I've never worked like that. And even with the Ruby Star, it's one of the things I love about their thing is because you can take like Kim Kite's last couple of lines and they all work together.
Yep.
You can grab 5 or 6 lines and it all plays beautifully. All of it is sort of, it makes that really easy to use lots and lots of prints. But this was only the second time in my quilting career I'd worked within a limited fat quarter bundle. I'm not rushing to do it again.
Yeah.
It stifles your creativity a bit. You quilt yourself into a corner and you're like, oh, no, I can't. I've got to stay within this crayon box. And I want to add watercolors, but no, we're just playing with these sets of crayons.
But it's one of the things, and you touched on it early, is when I started on the journey of making this a business, and you get that first contact from a fabric company and they're like, we'd like you to use this, and you're so excited that someone's noticed you and you're like, oh, I've made it, a fabric company wants me to work with their fabric, and they go, yeah, you got to use the whole line, and you're like, and you're like, can I put solids in it? No, this designer doesn't have solids. Like, okay. Can I put blenders? No, just what's in the bundle. And you're like, okay. And for me, I struggled for a lot of years at the detriment to my own mental health and my business to play inside that box and to go, this is the only way I can succeed. If I have to have the fabric companies on side, and so I will work with their lines as they stipulate, but they were the projects that I delayed. They were the projects that I was late on delivery and therefore did more damage to my brand than if I'd said no. They were the ones that I didn't enjoy any of the process, and that poor decision on my part contributed to burnout within my creativity. And it's not a right or a wrong thing. It's just that's how my creativity works. And so for some people, the bundle is a godsend and it helps them in when they're time poor, or they don't have the confidence yet to pick and choose, or they don't have a giant stash to dive into and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a place for every style in quilting. It's one of the things I love about quilting is that it's so broad and so inclusive of everybody's creativity. I just had to be honest with myself and go, that's not how I work. And realize that success can come if you don't follow the standard, everyone says you should do this kind of thing. You can blaze your own trail and it's okay. And now the things that I make now without working for a fabric company, some of my favorite stuff. So, and I'm more excited about what I do and things like that. So I completely empathize and understand. I'm yet to find a whole line, like even the people I love, I still pick and choose from their releases and go, yeah, I'll have a little bit of that and I'll have a bit of that and I'll ditch that. But yeah, it's interesting how our brains work. Like, and what brings us all different levels of joy. And so you've met the Ruby Star ladies, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
They are amazing, right? Where everybody just
yes. Yes.
No bias.
So I didn't fangirl as much as I did with Lizzie because there was a group of them and I just
because there's 5, right? I always forget. There's 5.
Yeah.
Rashida, Kim,
Alexa, Kim, Rashida,
Melody, Sarah. Yep.
Here are some results. Alexa, stop.
She's now ringing Sarah.
I stopped her from doing that. Oh, dear.
But yeah. And really, Cotton and Steel early on, Bluebird is still one of my all-time favourite collections.
Yep.
And I had the
black and white is mine.
I was looking, so I did a cotton and steel version of 100 Days when we were still using City Sampler. So it would have been in the first 3 years of it, because they were very supportive of 100 Days, and they were so gracious and generous, and they went, you can pick from anything. They kind of went, you can just play across everything. And as you said, because they've got blenders and different styles of prints and everything, that was a lot easier to do. But one of my favourite blocks in that quilt is that, you know, that lime green colour that they did? No, what do they call it? It's a citron. Their citron colour.
Yes.
Paired with their black and white, grey, tanny colours. And it is, to this day, I saw it last night when we were getting into bed, because we've got it on our bed at the moment. And I'm like, that's just so glorious. Why didn't I do a whole quilt in those colours? And all I bought was fat quarters of that collection. So I scoured eBay, Etsy, D-stashes, local quilt stores, everything to try and just add more of that black and white collection to my stash.
So when we wrap this up, send me what you're looking for.
Oh, I'm not looking anymore.
You're not looking anymore. You're done.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. But, yeah, no. Can you see behind me here?
Oh, jeez. Those are bolts of fabric.
And I have, you know, those plastic tubs that go under your bed where they're about this high but they're long rectangle. Mm-hmm. I keep all of my stash in those, and I have 2 of them of the black and white collection. So I'm pretty much set.
You did okay.
Yeah.
You're sourcing it nice.
Yeah, and I'm at that point now where I'm kind of like, you know that thing that they do with your house, that when they do the Marie Kondo stuff for your house, when they're like, if you buy a pair of shoes, you have to throw out a pair of shoes. You can't bring something in without getting rid of something else. So my thing now is I have to use the fabric before I can bring more fabric in. Occasionally I slip up and something will sneak in. But, yeah, I'm just trying to – I'm not on an anti-fabric buying thing, which really bothers me when people are like, I'm never buying fabric again. I'm on a more selective kind of thing. And I think from memory, did I send you cotton and steel?
You did.
Yeah. See? I knew who would love it.
And I've been using it. Yeah, I get a lot of scraps and bits and pieces that are donated to the charity program, and I never say no, because I also feed into other charity programs. So stuff comes into me, and if it's not right, it'll go to Project Linus for kids. If it's not right, it will go. Bigger stuff was going to Coffee Creek, which is a correctional centre near here, which does quilting. So I also sent about 6 boxes to the Navajo Project, which is a Native American project, which goes out of about 3 states. And so I send them a lot of stuff. So everything that comes in, I sort of, as my husband calls it, triage, and then keep what we can use and then send out. But I've got so much, which is why there's only fat quarters of Ruby Star entering my house, because otherwise I'm drowned in fabric. Though I did make 22 quilt backs yesterday, which blew through more fabric than
I think there should be a organisation out there that is solely for quilters that acts like an estate management thing, where, because I've always said, and when we went and did our wills when we moved up here, we changed them and everything, I went into the guy, the solicitor, and I was like, I've got this list. Can you put this list with my will? And he's like, what's the list for? And I'm like, it's fabric collections and who they go to. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I just, like, Beck Skyberries gets all my Lizzie House.
Yes.
Cath will get my Cotton and Steel Ruby Star. You know, like, just all that kind of...
Yeah.
I'll add Jill I can never say. I'll add I'll add Zippy Bro to your list of stuff that you get, because there's bolts of it over there. So, but I'm like, someone needs to coordinate, because there are quilters passing away with good stuff that their partners could conceivably dump. And so
at the charity program, we've got a few estate things, which is how I got into the triage business. People would sort of contact and say, my grandmother, my mother, we've got all this stuff. It's also how some of the charity blocks that I do, how they came about was because the program inherited probably about a decade ago, someone's mother's stash. It wasn't a big stash. It was about 10 boxes of fabric, but it was a lot of hunter greens, browns, and creams. And this was when the program was starting up, so I didn't say no to anything, and I kept it. But I started making wonky trees. So we would have sew days where we made wonky trees, and they used the creams, they used the browns, and they used the greens. And I've just sent out into the world our 22nd wonky tree quilt. So every year we make 2 to 3 wonky tree quilts. One of them always goes to a charity that we support, Camp Erin, which is a camp that happens every year for kids who are grieving.
Yep.
So if they've lost a parent or a sibling, the hospital has this camp. And so we make sure our local camp has quilts on their bed. And then some go to the hospital and things like that. But it was like, what do I do with these fabrics? Oh, trees. And they're the most fun quilts. I have a couple of quilters who are like, I want to quilt one. They're the one that people want to quilt. Every single one is different. I could pull up photos of all of them, and every single one is different. And I love it. It's really fun. But that was the challenge that came from inheriting some of that older fabric. But that's where my connections to the Navajo Project and Coffee Creek and places that take a lot more of that traditional fabric. Yeah. But we've also added a charity to our program in the last couple of years that takes – so I used to just focus on kids. I sort of got into charity quilting because my sister was a nurse. And so I used to make quilts for her chemo kids. So I've just always made kids' quilts. But we've added a hospice. I've actually added 2 hospices, local hospices. So a lot of the quilts that aren't kid-friendly and are more grown up now head into hospice. Yeah. We're about to deliver 12 on Sunday to one of the hospices. So, yeah, it's interesting because, we get tops, we get fabric, and there's been a couple of estate sales here in Portland where the estate sale has been about the person's fabric. Yeah. And the news went, throughout all the guilds here. But one of them in particular was 5 rooms.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Of fabric.
Yep.
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's like when there's a lot, the estate people know what to do. When it's smaller, people have been reaching out to Project Linus, to the guild, to, there are places that it can go, but it's making sure your family knows where it can go.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Grant. I'm like, and he's really good. Like, he understands my precious. And so he'd be very good about it. But I just kind of go, and it's one of the reasons I started quilting is and I love that you do so much charity stuff for this very reason. I think a quilt gives someone a virtual hug in fabric form. And so, like, I remember when my gran was in the old person's home, there is a nicer way of saying it, and I made a quilt for her bed, and the amount of people that would comment on the colour, like, it brightens up the halls, it's so nice, and at the time I was like, oh, I wish I had capacity to make everyone in the building a quilt because it makes such a difference. And
it does.
The softie in me really likes the idea that kids who are grieving get that snuggle factor.
Yeah. The camp is actually, there was in the US anyway on Netflix, there was a documentary series about the camp because it's actually pretty groundbreaking and amazing, and you watch it and there's no dry eyes left. And I love that idea that they get to take the quilt home with them. but I mean, I learned pretty early on through my sister because I was making quilts and they were going directly from me into my sister's hands to the kids.
Yeah.
And I was getting feedback firsthand about what they were doing because it was back in a time where the kids would go into isolation. She worked in oncology and they'd spend 6 weeks in isolation. So the quilt was one of the things that went in with them. But my sister also went to funerals where my quilts were draped over the coffin. She went to way too many of those. So I knew the impact. And I think that helps because it's really hard. I mean, last week we sent out 22 quilts to our local hospital. I have no idea. They go in through a nurse again who's a friend of another quilter. But I have no idea where they go, where they end up or anything. But that early sort of indication of just the good they did keeps me going. And then when I had a stroke, the first thing my husband did when I was in the ICU was bring me in one of the quilts that Sam had made me. And that was like, oh, that's right. These things are really powerful, really, really powerful.
Yeah. And it's...
So, yes, I encourage anyone to, even if you just, make a charity quilt.
There was in Queanbeyan, I think the Queanbeyan quilters do a charity where they make, if my memory serves correctly, they make quilts for police to keep in the boot of their car so that if they have like a kid, there's a kid at an accident or a kid in a domestic violence situation or, you know, they're taking the kid away from a home or something, the kid has the quilt to go with them.
And it stays with them.
And I always go, oh, that's a real knife edge because you think, oh, no, that kid would associate that with that traumatic event. But the kids always seem to associate it with kindness. It's not it's not the event that they link it to. And so it's one of the things when people are like, why do you make quilts? Why do you have so many quilts? Why do you have so many quilts? Why do you keep making them? Surely 3's enough. There's only 3 of you in the family. And I think because if anything happens to me, God forbid, then everyone in my family has a hug from me for whatever. You know, and we have a quilt that if the kid gets sick on a school day, that's the quilt that goes on his bed because that's sick day quilt, right? So, and it's, do you remember I'm a Ginger Monkey, Katie Jones?
Yes.
She had a really popular pattern that people still email me to ask me about called a scrap vomit, and it's essentially just a postage stamp quilt.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first quilts I made, and it's a king size, bigger than a king size quilt, and there's not a single repeat of fabric in it. And so there's like over 1,000 squares or something, 1,400 squares in it or something. But that's his sick day quilt, the vomit quilt. And so he can play I Spy and even now he's like 11, which stinky age, and he's getting to be so independent and such his own person. But he gets sick and it's, Mum, can I have the quilt? Yeah, bud.
And that I Spy aspect, that's how I got into fussy cutting. So a lot of my quilts were because the theory was, in my head, the theory was this kid's got 6 weeks in isolation with very little other than this quilt.
Yep.
Let's give him something to
look at,
to play I Spy with and look at. And so, I fussy cut away.
Yeah.
And, that's fun. And I still, I've made the scrap vomit. I'm currently got a box of a couple of 1,000 2.5-inch squares that I've die cut out of scraps. And I'm just going to
leader and ender. Yeah.
Some together because those are really fun.
Yeah.
Those are really fun.
And
but
oh, sorry. Yeah, go.
Sorry,
no,
go.
You go.
No, you go.
After you. No, after you. No, after you. No, you hang up.
And now I've lost my train of thought.
No, you hang up. No, I'll hang up. I do this thing, and I don't know whether you do it or not, but I do this thing where I play a little game in my head where sometimes I make quilts where I theme out the fabric. So I did it I'm finishing it up right now, but I did a couple of 100 days ago where I did a nautical version. Every fabric in the quilt had some sort of nautical tie to it. And so when I was making the blocks, because 100 days of blocks is a lot of blocks, I was telling myself little stories like this sailor has gone away from home and these are the gloves of his loved one. Because you remember the glove print from Cotton Steel?
Cat Lady.
Yeah, and
What's Cat Lady?
and then there was like a love letters, like and the swallow. And so I have a big collection of fabrics that are by theme, and I try and tell a story. Like in my own head, it's not like I write out the story and go, hey, here's a quilt and here's the story that goes with it.
Here's the essay attached to the back. Yeah.
I wrote a 1,000-page novel. Here you go. But that's the other way that I work. And I don't know why, but it just amuses me. Like every quilt has some sort of little Easter egg of humour in it for me.
I love
and
that.
I don't know why.
I love that.
It's like the rock out thing, right? I put that in and every time I see it, I'm like, and that was a shirt from Threadless. Remember Threadless, the T-shirt company?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a shirt titled that and I got it for Grant one birthday. But that's
I lost you.
But that's the thing that I like. I often hide. I've got the Dr. Seuss I Am Sam I Am repeat. And so I'll often hide that in a quilt that I know the kid's going to get because that's his name. Or if I'm sending it to Sam Hunter, I'll pop that in there. Like, yeah.
I was going to say, Sam, on the back of Sam's quilts, there is that corner which has got the I Am Sam fabric on it.
So
that's how she signs her quilts, which I love.
Yeah, like it's those little – that's what I love about quilters. Like they're just – everyone's got their own little gift and their own thing that makes them special. But yes, but Cath, I could talk to you all day.
I love that idea. I must admit mine is I don't tell stories like that, but mine is just about every quilt I do, I'm doing something different or I'm challenging myself.
Yeah, which
occasionally I'm just making a quilt to blow the cobwebs out and like when you get stuck and you just sew stuff together and see how you go. But most of the time it's like, oh, this looks like fun. Let's try this. Because I'm doing it for I'm doing it for pleasure. I don't have those limits and I can just there's something freeing in that for me anyway.
Yeah.
The fact that it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't
But that's the idea, right? Like life's too short to not have fun.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
And if I see people post things on social media where they're like, I've lost my sojo, I don't know what I'm doing, it's no fun for me anymore. And I'm like, dude, walk away. That's like, don't walk away forever, but go do something else for a bit.
Take a break.
Yep. Take a painting course or a pottery class or mosaics or, scrapbooking or something. Go out, have a sorbet project. That's what I call them because it's a palate cleanser. And then come back.
Yeah. I must admit, I do improv blocks.
Yeah.
That's when I get stuck, I just sew bits together. And sometimes mine's a scrap vomit quilt in a different way. It's, I'm trying to remember her name. She did a book. Anyway, I'm having a brain fart. I'll send the link. But yeah, she did a scrap vomit quilt, which was quite literally taking your scraps and sewing like sizes together and then sewing and then just building it from there. And that's what I do. I just sew bits. It's more just getting back behind the machine so that I don't start looking at the machine and freaking out.
Yeah.
Like it's just keep those things going and just, because the kid's not going to care. Like the kid that gets my quilt's not going to care. They're not going to care if my quilting's wonky or if, the bunny rabbit's ears pegged off or if, it doesn't look, the kid's not going to care.
But that's the thing, right?
And that's freeing.
I would love to start a revolution where if someone says, I love your quilt, the person who that is said to goes, thanks, it has pockets. Because oftentimes they go, thanks, or they don't even say thanks. They go, oh, but I missed the point there. And, oh, this colour doesn't work the way I'd hoped. And, oh, that's not, meh, meh, meh. And I think just take the compliment. No one is looking at your quilt as, what's that word? Critically as you are.
No.
You are the only person that sees that. Don't point it out. They'll never know. And so it's that thing where I'm kind of like, don't lose your joy in focusing on the stuff that goes pear-shaped. And oftentimes, if stuff doesn't go pear-shaped, you're not learning, because it's when stuff goes wrong that you work out the stuff. But yes, but as I said, Cath, I could talk to you all day, but we probably shouldn't. Thank you for joining me. We've been talking for an hour. Like,
yeah, but we haven't said anything. Have we? Well, anything of importance or no, we've just gossiped and
yeah.
You'll edit it down. It'll be like 3 minutes of like anything of.
It'll be 20 minutes of how amazing Canberra is, and then, oh yeah, Cath makes a quilt. Thanks for listening.
That's exactly what it's going to be.
Now,
exactly what it's going to be.
I'm going to put all the links to the amazing charities and some information on how people can get involved with charity sewing and ways to get in contact with their local guilds and things like that. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for sharing your time. We will talk again because we're in Bake Club.
We are.
And
I've just baked.
Yeah, well, I'm baking today. God willing. It's raining.
We haven't left the house. This is day 8 of not being able to leave the house because we're snowed in and now we're iced in.
Yep.
And I ran out of flour.
So you're milling your own?
So no, I'm making macaroons because macaroons take almond meal. But yeah, like COVID prepared us for this a lot better than, like, we've dealt with this a lot better than usual. But yeah, being out of baking stuff is no. Because you can't even, like, get someone to deliver stuff because the roads are impassable. So.
Yeah, we got an 85% chance of getting a tropical cyclone next week. And so I'm like, oh, got to make sure we got flour.
Yeah. And food.
Yeah, well, if we've got flour, I can make food.
Well, and food's secondary, but yeah. No.
But yeah, so we will talk again on Bake Club, and then we'll get together and talk more about fabric because there are collections coming and people need to sit around and waste time talking about them. But yes, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you, that was fun.
And we'll talk again soon.
Once we got the technicalities sorted.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Fussy Cutters podcast. Enjoyed listening? Why not subscribe so you'll never miss an episode? Did you know the quickest way to the heart of any podcaster is to leave a review or recommend the podcast to a friend? It's true, it is. Until next week, get out there and fondle that fabric.